Namaste. Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.
So I have a splitting headache because the feverish writing of the third book is underway. So I have a deadline. I have to finish it. I have to balance it with my commitments as a practicing litigator during the day, and then balance this with writing schedules of 2 to 3 hours in the night. So my apologies if there is a drop in the energy levels, but I think the best part of sharing space with all these dignitaries is that they have a sobering effect. And especially what Pandit Sharmaji spoke at the end of it, I wish he had continued for a few more minutes. So I was just thinking, how do I connect decolonization, dharma, and democracy? And I think, I just said Justice Sharma, I'm so sorry. Pandit Sharma has just given us a fantastic foundation for it. Between decolonization, dharma, and democracy, what's our priority? Okay. What is the path? Decolonization. So what is the role of democracy? Exactly the point. Exactly the point. So the question that you need to ask yourself is, what is the destination? What is the intermediate step? And what is the path? Had this been a left of center audience, there's a decent chance that I would have been told the priority is democracy. Yes. Not that it's a bad thing to have. I'm not making that statement one bit. I'm not making an anti-democratic statement. But what is under fire? Dharma or democracy? Dharma. That's it. Those are your priorities. So does it mean that we don't care for democracy? No. Exactly. Because the leftist is bound to see this as a zero-sum equation where he thinks that we are having this conversation in binaries. That it's dharma versus democracy. No, that's not the silo that we need to embrace. Why is this crucial? One of the things that I have been asked to touch upon is whether decolonization is saffronization. Should we allay somebody's fears on decolonization translating to saffronization? I'm sorry, I would say yes, it is. Because it is saffron that makes everybody else's existence possible. That much has been established through history. The fact that everybody else thinks it's possible for them to thrive and flourish in hopefully what is still at least a 70% Hindu majority nation is not the existence of a 400-page document. The document may or may not have value or respect or force 50 kilometers away from Delhi. If somebody were to actually recall the race riots that happened in Los Angeles in 1990s, the moment law and order went into a state of what I call animated suspension, riots broke out and people were looting and plundering each other's shops. This has happened even in instances of natural calamity. But if somebody were to recall the earthquake of Bhuj and several other instances of natural calamities and disasters having visited this country, the instances of looting have actually been far and few in between, because it's not the presence of law and order that makes us peaceful, but there is an inherent barometer, and that barometer is what crudely translates to dharma. Now here the important aspect that I think people forget is that we have inherited dharma as a sanskara. Now what do you mean by sanskar in so-called modern terms? Sanskar effectively translates to certain traits that have been encoded into your DNA thanks to at least 3 to 4 generations having practiced it. Exactly. So you may call it epigenetics today. But we call it sanskara because we have imbued it with a certain degree of sanctity. We have sacralized everything. What do you mean by sacralizing everything? Making everything sacred. Not making everything religious, but making everything sacred. That is what preserves respect. That is what keeps karma in action all the time, where even the worst of criminals has to ask himself, if I were to do this, would I have to pay the price in this life or the next? Or we believe in the concept of a pious sin, which means the sins of the father will visit the children, in fact, right? So there is a very clear anthropological, epigenetic relationship that we have established between action and consequence. What level of sophistication must it take for you to understand human consciousness for you to arrive at this equation? And how many thousands of years of trial and error we would have gone through to actually break this code when people are struggling with artificial intelligence today? Artificial intelligence is at the end of the day a replication of human consciousness. It should be Bharatiyas who should be at the forefront of it. Not yet. Not yet. Hopefully we should be. And hopefully we don't reduce the conversation about artificial intelligence merely to reduction of jobs. It has a much more dangerous consequence if it is wielded without a dharmic code. Hence, Dharma. So, Dharma is that code of conduct. I'm trying to connect all the dots that everybody has just placed before you. When Sri Mohandas Pai, and I'm grateful to him for his effusive praise of me, which I genuinely don't think I deserve, and I'm not saying this from any sense of false humility, I'm not a humble person one bit. I just don't subscribe to the colonized sense of Indian humility under any circumstance. If I'm good at something, I will own up to it. If I'm not, I will not claim it, period. One is that when you realize that you need the Chaturvarna system, the much maligned Sanatana Dharmic system that is under attack in the neighboring state, is that it realizes that arrogation of all forms of knowledge and power in the hands of one individual is deeply problematic. And therefore you say, I don't know how many students of law are here. How many? Anyone? Okay, good. If you're in law school, as part of jurisprudence you're taught something called as the Hegelian matrix. And what does this basically say? It's a cube. And in that cube, every vertex represents either a right or a duty. So one vertex will represent the right and the other opposite vertex will represent the countervailing duty or obligation. To say that there can never be a right without a duty or vice versa. And that is what we effectively say. Arey Baba, if you think this is the sense of, let's say, entitlement you're supposed to live with, then it also comes with certain obligations. And those obligations translate to the different forms of karma. You can call it Samanya Dharma. From there you go to Vishesha Dharma. Then you have Nitya Karma being specifically enforced as part of your personal code of conduct. So you're constantly told two things. Your vocation is not just a job. Take it seriously, because every other aspect of the society depends on you doing a job well. So nobody needs to treat us or rather teach us dignity of labor. But we need to teach ourselves what we knew once, which is dignity of labor. A lot of people believe that the destruction of the existing traditional structure in the pockets that it exists is the only way that Hinduism will become united, or the Hindu society will become united. I think that's misreading the entire situation. So during the Ambedkarite movement and around that period, there were quite a few movements and there was a huge conversation going on within that movement, and it was not as if it was a monolithic movement. There were multiple voices within coming from the same set of backgrounds. So without dropping names here, because who knows what kind of name will lead to what kind of legal action, I will basically give you a few pointers, and I trust the intelligence of the Hindu audience to draw its own conclusions. One, if there are non-Hindus, you're welcome to suffer this. One is basically saying Hindu Dharma is the root of all evil. Its manifestation is Varnashrama Dharma. So if you want to finish Hindu Dharma, finish Varnashrama Dharma. And therefore a book comes out. Second, there are other people within the fold saying, you know what? We are not fighting here for destruction of Hindu Dharma. We are fighting for our rights to be respected equally as Hindus. And we don't wish to convert out of this religion. This is the religion of our ancestors. We will die on the funeral pyre as Hindus. Unfortunately, those voices which took this position never got any place in history books. The ones who effectively said the only way that this evil can be addressed is by destruction of Sanatana Dharma have become the most popular, fashionable voices. Doesn't that seem very, very coincidental? That everyone under the rubric of social reform is accepted so long as the end goal is destruction of Sanatana Dharma. But the ones who want to address the problem and retain the religion don't find space at all, either in mind or in books. Why? Ask the Marxist and ask the Nehruvian. Because the constant thing that's been reinforced in us is that there is fundamentally an incurable, incorrigible defect in our DNAs. That there is a manufacturing defect at the outset. And that defect is Varnashrama Dharma. It was, if you look at how it has functioned, and I am not going to say in theory this is how it was, but in action it was corrupted. For the better part of it, what you will see is that it was seen as a ladder for people to climb up their levels of evolution. And one of the finest voices to have understood this was Sri Narayana Guru. His movement basically told all the affected parties, you know what? Compete. Compete with confidence. Socially, religiously, financially, in every way possible, and climb the ladder. Equality can be achieved in two ways: pull everybody down or go up. So he said, go up. So that was one of the few instances where a social reform movement was replacing victimhood with pride. And therefore, you are saved the trouble of having to indulge in the competitive, destructive race to the bottom called who is the greater victim. And that is the pathology of Indian caste politics and reservation politics. Very uncomfortable to say this, no? Suffer it. You've called me. What can I say? 3. I don't believe that Indian economic force can be restrained anymore unless we buy the Delhi Chief Minister's model. That model follows a scorched earth policy, which is if I can't have it, I will destroy it. And that it is power. And the casualty is Bharat. And I don't see the point in naming a person because that's a mindset that is prevalent across the country now. Correct. There is a multiplier effect the moment you're in Delhi, for good or bad. But the point I'm trying to make is you must realize that you can fixate on individuals or you can fixate on mindsets. And the thing that always lasts is an idea. So it is attitudes and ideas that you must focus on. And that requires you to understand what is this process of decolonization. I've been accused of being a Brahminical stooge who's trying to use decolonization to bring back Brahmin dominance. A lot of people have actually said this. I said, the moment you do this, you are perpetuating the stereotype that has been perpetuated about us by missionaries during the colonial period. No matter who does this, whichever party, whichever outfit, whichever ideology does this, has bought into this fully. 3, from the lofty heights of Pandit Sharma's discourse, I must say all of this talk is useless when you are failing or losing the demographic battle. Fertility rate is what ultimately it comes down to. And you don't need state support for it, the good part. If you need state support for it, there's a problem there. So my point is, aspire for the lofty heights of Dharma, but the best part about Dharma is that it has its feet firmly planted in Bhumi. And therefore it says, as much as someone must indulge in the study of the Vedas and impart it to the rest of the world, there must be someone holding the sword, making it possible for the rest of us to lead a dharmic life. And it must be equally possible for somebody to generate wealth, because you can keep chanting everything, but buwa kahan se aayega? And who is going to ensure that the society keeps running? Respect everyone. That's the point. Perhaps we should give this solution, a tentative solution, a shot, because all our social reform initiatives have fallen flat. If anything, they've only created a deeply casteist and intense society and divided society. I don't think that from the 1920s to 2024, we have become a society which is much more confident of its identity and of its unified nature. It has become even more divided. So, I've always said this. I'm very, how do I put it? My interest in the political aspects of decolonization are secondary, because that is only incidental. I'm more interested in the societal aspects of decolonization because that's more lasting. It is slower, but it nevertheless pays its rewards. How many of you have been offered a biryani packet and alcohol to come here? To hear such a dry topic on decolonization? Surely, all the efforts that people like Dr. Vikram Sampath and generations of unsung heroes have put in have finally paid off, because that literature is beginning to surface now. I am a pygmy standing on the shoulders of giants. People who have never had the benefit of social media, who were never even recognized, who continue to toil away, were doing this in the true Bhagavad Gita spirit. At least I have the advantage of social media positional advantage. At least 2 million followers across the board. Which of them had that? They were hounded. They were finished. They were wiped off. Their careers destroyed. So as Mr. Sharma says, this is the generation that was blessed with witnessing Pran Pratishtha. Don't ever forget that. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. It's a windfall gain, which none of us, allow me to say this, deserve. It has been handed to us on a platter, hoping that we will understand its significance and continue the work, and that we don't have to wait for another 496 years to reclaim the rest of the thousands of occupied sites. So what is it that we can do? Be smart. That's the first thing. That's the first thing. Uncontrolled aggression is impotence. It leads to nothing. You're firing blanks, pun intended. Choose your field of activity depending on what the Devatas have blessed you with in terms of skill sets. And find a way to contribute to this ongoing silent movement in your own spheres of influence. Everybody must become a Hindu missionary. Hold power to account no matter who wields it. And I am not going to give any person a free pass in the name of Hindutva. I'm very clear about it. I'm very, very clear about it. Because they have dual responsibility. They need to deliver on development. 100%. And they also, and perhaps even more importantly, need to deliver on Dharma. I'll answer the question. The Q&A will come. Don't worry. I am here to answer the questions. My point is very simple. Assume for a moment that you become a first world country with first world infrastructure and you have lost Dharma. You could have done that by converting hundreds of years ago. You could have done that long ago. Why did your ancestors fight?
Only for roads? Or for BSP, not Bahujan Samaj Party, Bijli Sadak Pani. Or only for Bijli Sadak Pani. No. Under the peril of death, torture, sexual humiliation of the worst possible kind for 800 years, they have lived through it. So clearly there is something else which is at the heart of it. And the best possible example that I can give of someone who, according to me, has become a tragicomic character is Richard Dawkins. Until a few years ago, this gentleman kept saying, I read the Bible for the beauty of its poetry. I am an atheist. And today, he calls himself a cultural Christian. You know why? Atheists realize the value of religion when they realize that ultimately it provides you a sense of community and protection. Period. They will realize that when they realize that their atheism is not going to save them from the sword of the barbarian. And their atheism is made possible by a tolerant society. I have no problem with cultural Hindus and atheists. Let me say this, because as Mr. Pai says and Dr. Sharma says, we don't believe in imposition. If you're not blessed to understand the value of Hindu Dharma, that's your karma. No problem. No problem. Just don't reduce the rest of us to your standards. And do not use yourself as the golden standard to judge the rest of our institutions. You have no skin in this game. You have no dog in this race. You're an insider-outsider. So the point I'm trying to make is, all our priorities today are at a point of convergence. You can't give up on any of them, because it is economics that makes it possible for Bharat to withstand geopolitical forces. It is economics that saves us from predatory, missionary, evil hands which want to save our souls. But if it is going to be pure economic development without a dharmic foregrounding or a foundation, you will lose your children in droves. So today there are instances where families are divided because of this specific issue, where people are unable to understand what's going on with their children. What is that zombie bug that has bitten them? They have no clue. I have the answer. You send them to certain schools. What do you think was going to happen? So a few weeks ago, there was a controversy about Sai Deepak also studied in St. Anthony's High School. He came out okay. I'd say, Baba, that was destiny. That was not the intention. Surely they didn't intend me to come out like this. Are you going to play on this chance? Or do you want a process or a system to address this problem? If education has to become a priority, if all our important issues have to become priorities other than, let's say, Bijli, Sadak and Pani, the intelligentsia of the Hindu community must coalesce and create a pressure group, forcing every government to take heed of these issues. Otherwise, the last decade, which was fantastically successful on the economic front, every initiative that the government wanted to bring about in the interest of this country was stalled by students. Whether it's the CAA or the NRC or whatever it may be, students were fielded as weapons on the streets. So if you think that history education is the pastime of the rich and affluent, and it's a storm in a teacup, well, that storm is playing itself out on your streets. And you don't have a response mechanism. You don't know what to do about it. Okay, let's ask ourselves this simple question. If this represents a significant cross-section of this youth demographic, who is going to join the armed forces? How many people are going to join the armed forces if the armed forces have been vilified? The Indian state has been called a colonizing state. We are being told that Kerala has been colonized by India and Kashmir has also been colonized by India. These are the papers that are coming out of certain institutions based out of Mumbai, by the way. This is not an exaggeration. So, The battle is very real. This is not Katha Kalakshepam. I've said this over and over again. Get very real. Decolonization is an existential imperative for the Hindu society. For it to understand the layers of mental colonization it has suffered and it continues to suffer. This is going to be an extremely volatile, uncomfortable period because you're not going to fight an outsider. You're going to have constant arguments and battles with the insider, trying to convince that your ancestors were not savages and that they were not inhuman oppressors. And this conversation will be incomplete if I don't mention the one important component of Dharma, which is perhaps its foundation, its root cause, its prime cause, Prakriti, environment. In the rush to become a developed society on Western lines, don't make their mistakes. I'm 100% sure every society has had something of value to offer to the global pool of human thought, including the Western society. Try and learn from them whatever is good without slavishly importing it. But ask yourself whether it would work for this country, for its local conditions, for its population. Ask that question. Don't be a mental slave where you simply import something merely because it works outside. Whether that entire economic model works here, what is the indigenous Bharatiya working economic model that we can think of that strikes a balance between the genuine aspirations of people to rise above poverty and also preserves environment? That's a hard question that we need to ask. Otherwise, Bangalore is seeing the Rudratandav now. And this is merely, according to me, a trailer of what is to come across the world, not just Bharat. I am genuinely someone who believes that climate change is real. If it gets me brickbats, so be it. I don't care. And therefore, we need to address this. And because I've said this before, that there is no Dharma without Prakriti, Hindu society must show the way forward for two reasons. You're perhaps at that cusp where you have the ability to change the rules of the game. You're doing this internationally. You finally have the spine to stand up to Western powers and take a decision in your national interest. You must show the very same spine in revisiting the economic model, especially in eco-sensitive zones, so that you don't make the mistakes of the past and leave an irreversible problem for the future. So demographics, decolonization, Prakriti, education, history. All major points have been touched upon. So when you go to the hustings this time, I am not going to ask you to vote for any particular individual. I am going to ask you to invoke your conscience, to ask this simple question. Even if somebody may not be able to do all of this, who is the best possible candidate with whom we can air these expectations and hope that we can push them in the right direction to get the job done? That is the simple, practical question I will ask. Who offers the best possible, let's say, alternative or option for at least some of these aspects to be addressed so that this journey can be taken forward, because this is going to be at least a 25 to 35 year journey. And with what is happening in the Middle East, you need a firm hand to steer this ship. You need money, you need spine, you need clarity of vision, and you need character. Someone who knows that they're answerable in the afterlife to the gods above, and someone who has a conscience. Who that individual is for you to decide. I am not here to spoon feed at all. When people ask me, what do you think we can do? Because on a daily basis, I keep getting DMs and messages and emails. I'm sorry to say, it just so happens that I'm fundamentally a ruthlessly, ferociously introverted person outside of this. So I literally shun people the moment I'm off the place. My mother has to literally shake me to get words out of me. So when people keep asking this question, So I thought I'll actually put out a video of some sort, but I'm against the concept of a self-recorded video because it goes against the optics of being a practicing litigator, so I don't wish to do it. So I'll use this forum to present a few actionable deliverables within your power that you can do so that you know what is it that you can do to take this forward. One, all the opinions that I have today, I've had them at least since 2004 or at least since 2009. I tried telling the very same things to a lot of people around that period. But why should anybody listen to me? What has made it possible for me to get an audience is my command over my subject. And even if I say so, let's use the word proficiency, if not expertise, when it comes to my core areas of competence. So, as a Hindu who believes in being a karma yogi, you must be absolutely brilliant at what you do. That is the first thing that gets you an audience. That is what gives you financial independence and mental independence to pursue your cultural initiatives. I will never go and ask anybody to contribute to any initiative that I wish to support. You wish to do, you do it, I don't care. I will do it because I have the ability to do it. You want to match, you match. So that gives you the independence. Second, a hardcore spiritual and religious grounding which must become a part of your daily life. I'm asking you to spend not more than 15 to 20 minutes a day in at the very least revisiting your roots in some form or the other. The good part is not one day of the week is ours, every day of the week is ours. So, this battle is not ultimately a battle which is political, it is a battle of commitment to your astha. And if you don't get that, don't even hope to survive this battle because the other side is committed like nobody's business, and I deeply and grudgingly admire them for it. Because I learn from everyone like a sponge. Even if I don't like the person, if there is something good to be learned from that person, I will absorb it. Because at the end of the day, survival of the community is more important than individual egos. 3, start addressing the caste problem in a very realistic way by supporting those who are in need of help. You don't need to wait for the state to do it always. At some point, these initiatives between people will deliver goods. It will show because people will know that here is someone who is trying to help me. When you do that, you're also taking them away from predators. The more we go down a political discussion on reservation, it will only divide us further. The answer lies in society, not in politics. I've said this often, over and over again. When temples become the point of convergence, where they preserve their traditions in accordance with the Shastras, because I certainly believe that Shastras have a value no matter who calls me what, and they also perform their societal obligations and reach out to the underprivileged, that is exactly when you're actually in a position to start having a decent, honest, and calm conversation on reservations. Until then, this conversation will never start. No political entity has the incentive to start it. They have a disincentive to start it. So here, society has to take the lead. 3. 4, please keep a watch on your children. Unrestrained independence is not a badge of honor. It's not a badge of pride. Don't wear it shamelessly. Have some supervision of what is happening. You know we are being targeted in multiple ways. I don't need to spell it out. So please keep a watch. The problem of the Hindu parent is they don't know whether to fill their children's heads with negativity and protecting them. I think that's their confusion. What do? I don't wish to poison their heads. The point is, Shatrubodh is not poison. That's an essential survival instinct. That is what has kept the Jewish identity alive. That is what has kept several indigenous communities alive across the board. One of the finest things that I have watched in recent times is that young Maori politician in New Zealand issuing the war cry of our ancestors from the floor of the parliament. Amazing. And if you watched her speech, this is what she basically said. This house has been interfering and touching things which it has no business touching, which is what they hold as sacred. And therefore, I've had no other option but to land in this house to protect my people. At my lecture in Berkeley, we made it a point to call someone from the indigenous community of California, specifically to say, we are here for you. Hindus have to take the lead in the revival of indigenous communities. That won't happen as long as you think of yourself as a brown sepoy. So decolonization is imperative for you to take leadership and provide an alternative new world order where there is respect for indigenous communities. We are an indigenous community, for God's sakes. Every non-Abrahamic community is an indigenous community. Yes. That is how the definition has become over the last 1,000 years. 5, find a way. So one is, of course, money, education, whatnot. Find a way to support those who are truly pursuing the Vedas. I have to make this statement because that much maligned, vilified micro-minority is being crushed from every place. I am not talking of the priestly category. I am talking of Vedadhyayis. Because that's been the traditional philosophy of this land. Call out hypocrisy wherever it exists. Nobody's going to stop you. Call out lack of character and integrity wherever it exists. Nobody's going to stop you. But at the same time, acknowledge the existence of those who have decided to pursue that in these volatile, hostile times, because this is not exactly a friendly atmosphere for pursuit of the Vedas. And if there are snakes who need to be wiped out, well, those snakes could have abandoned the study of the Vedas for something else. Because if they are so evil and so diabolical in their brains, surely those brains could have been used for earning money as opposed to suffering this kind of, let's say, calumny and vilification from their own people on a daily basis. Whether somebody says this or not, I will stand by the temple, the cow, and the tradition, period. My parameters of Hindutva will start and end there, period. Dilution of these first principles is dilution of Hindutva. What have I said which is remotely against any other person? All of this is to address internal problems, internal issues, internal inconsistency and discord. So for those ultra politically correct people, oh, does this speech have something that will create trouble for me in my office spaces? If I follow this? Well, if it creates trouble for you in your office spaces and you still decide that the office space is more important than protection of this culture, you deserve the fate that's coming your way. Then you have no reason to whine about this. Because at the end of the day, Dharma is universal, which means if Hindus don't want it, Dharma will find other Hindus. Which it is doing in Russia, it's doing in Europe, in UK, and in the United States, and in Africa. In Africa. So you don't want the wealth that your ancestors have given to you. There are others. That's exactly why the appropriation of traditional knowledge systems is going on at such a rampant pace from universities in Germany, which has been going on for hundreds of centuries now, or at least hundreds of years now, because they were the first ones to actually understand what was going on in this place. They decided to set up chairs. So the SOAS and all the Oxbridge universities came much later. It was the German Lutheran who decided that he needed to appropriate this knowledge. So you want it, protect it. If you don't, it will find a way. So you don't need to protect Dharma. Dharma will protect itself. There's a fantastic a stand-up comedian by the name George C. Carlin. I love his speeches. The one thing that he said about nature and climate change, he said, who do you think, and I'm not using the French that he used here, he said, who do you think you are to protect nature? Nature will protect itself. All it has to do is to hit reset and you're done. And the ice age will come and the whole cycle starts. So don't go under a messianic complex. You're doing this in self-interest and self-preservation, period. You don't wish to understand that, one deluge is enough. Pralay is enough. And then we are back to square one, drawing board stage. So with this, thank you, as always.